Thanks, Corla. I just wanted to maybe make a few points following on from that, and I think it was very important actually that the points raised by Deputy Wallace are put on the public record, because they do get to the heart, if you like, of some ethical and practical issues around this question. And I actually think it's a disgrace that the Minister isn't here. No disrespect to yourself, but it is unprecedented for any piece of legislation, and this Minister has lauded the fact that he's brought this in. He poses as someone who is a reforming minister, allegedly, but he couldn't even be bothered to be here this morning, and I think that is very, very regrettable, because while all sides of the House have welcomed the fact that we are talking about moving to a situation where we wouldn't have people going to prison for short sentences, that of course is a good thing, but that shouldn't lull us into a situation of therefore then just blindly accepting this legislation as, if you like, a step in the right direction. For all of the reasons highlighted by Deputy Wallace, I don't think it's actually a step in the right direction. I think it's a step from one failed policy to what will be another failed policy, and I want to make some points briefly around those points. In the first instance, and I know the Minister, the real minister, or the big minister, whatever you want to call him, moves in circles of people with deep pockets, but in actual fact, subliminally, what we're saying by this is that if you have the ability to pay, then basically you're being given a license to do whatever you like, that you will never face the ignominy of going to prison, you'll never face the possibility of having to do community service or whatever to atone for what you've done. You can pay your way out of anything, and I think that is a completely wrong message to be given in any society. It's particularly offensive for particular types of crimes, which unfortunately we're seeing the court system adopting a bit more. There was a report done there just after Christmas about the amount of monies that are collected in the court system, and I think County Kerry showed up as being the area where a quarter of all of the monies in court fines are dished out, if you like, in Kerry. So obviously the judiciary there have a particular tactic of not sending people to prison already, but instead fining them. But what it has in part led to is a lot of the local and community groups nearly relying on the money from the court system, and the word being out, if you like, that, well, you can pay your way out of anything. I don't know if the Minister saw there earlier in the year the situation of where a Dublin District Court judge gave a 21-year-old medical student who had pleaded guilty to violently assaulting his girlfriend. He gave him no record. He was allowed to walk free from the court without a record on the condition that he paid €5,000 to Women's Aid and to the Simon community. Now, there's a couple of problems with this one as far as I'm concerned. It does send out a signal that you can pay your way out of violent sexual assault and you can basically get away with it. And yet other people from a more disadvantaged background who don't have that ability to pay maybe get a record for something that's far less offensive than that, and that certainly can't be. I think there are issues as well about organisations like Women's Aid who do important work but having to rely on donations such as this is somewhat contradictory as far as I'm concerned, and I don't think that's in any way appropriate that people who would be guilty of such crimes would be allowed to pay fines in that way. But I think one of the worst parts of it is the very information, I suppose, given by Deputy Wallace about the amount of people who are in our prisons because of, in essence, crimes of poverty. In the idea of putting a financial penalty on those people isn't going to work. We were in Limerick prison last week visiting Margaretta Darcy and another elderly citizen, both of whom are serving short-term prison sentences in Limerick. And they were telling us of the types of people who were in Limerick with them, and that story is no different than any of our other prisons. The majority of people are young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. In the case of the women's prison, the same group of essentially young women coming in on short-term cycles of short-term sentences, children at home invariably, and family life disrupted. Now, many of those crimes are for, if you like, crimes of poverty, crimes linked to drugs and so on. Issuing a fine instead of a penal sentence how are they going to pay that? So if you're in for shoplifting, do you have to shoplift even more to pay the fine for what you were done for in the first place? It just doesn't make any sense. And if we really were to spend a fraction of the monies on giving people an education and a decent standard of living, well then I think we would, to be quite honest, be much better off in that scenario. So I think it is a good thing that people aren't being sent to prison for short sentences. It's ridiculous, and we're way out of kilter in Ireland and other countries. But we have to be very careful about the message we're sending out here. And I think, as I said, it's twofold. One is, if you're rich, you can pay your way out of anything and do what you like, in essence. But if you're disadvantaged, that situation isn't going to change. And unless we learn the lessons of that and start to deal with the inequality in our society, then unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be any nearer a more reformed and equitable type of society that I would certainly aspire to.